Welcome back to the Using Project and Resource Management with Clarity self-paced training course. This is Module 4, Resource Management Features. We have 4 learning objectives in this module. The first one is Resource Management Definitions. We want to get down and understand the key terms of resource management so we're all using the same language. Objective 2 is Resource Managers and Project Manager interface. How the PM and the resource manager work together is significant to the accomplishment of resource management for a project. The third objective is resource management process. We'll take a closer look at the overall concept and process of resource management. And finally, we'll look at finding resources within the Clarity system. And then, of course, as with other modules, we'll have hands-on practice exercise at the end. As with other modules, the first thing we'll do is to log into Clarity, and I'll log in as myself. And of course, as we learned before, we first go into Clarity at the overview page. And what I want to do for this module, I want to go into a project to start with to use it as a demonstration, and I could get there from the My Projects portlet, as we've talked about before, this being a very handy spot to collect all the projects that you have. But to reinforce our last class, of course, that we had, the last module, we're going to go into projects from the project link in the left menu. And we did this in the last module, and there we had built a filter, and I have a default filter built here that is based on my name as the project manager, so that gives me a list of all the projects that I am project manager on. And I've modified this layout of the projects, and as we did in the last course, the last module. And now what I want to do is pick that project to go to, so I'll just click on any new courseware project, and from there what I really want to do is go into the Team tab where we can actually visualize and see how some of the terms are used within the Clarity application. There are 4 terms that I want to talk about on this page to start with, and they are role, project role, resource, and primary role. As you see in here, when we have our project team, the first column is resource, and this is a generic sense in Clarity that Clarity considers resources 2 types: named resources and generic resources, also called roles. So we're going in here, in this column, we are staffing both roles as this first one, an architect, or named resources as myself down at the bottom here. So we have roles and named resources. Now when we put a named resource on a project, that named resource should be filling a role. In this case, for me, I am filling the project manager role. We will eventually get to a point where we need to have the architect role replaced with a named resource, and when that occurs, that named resource should be picking up the architect project role. So that we have the project role is something that we need to help with the placeholders for doing work on the project. The 4th term is primary role, and we don't actually see a column for primary role here. It actually appears in the resource record and the properties for the resource. So if you look at my name and the properties for the resource record on me, I actually have a primary role of project manager. When I staff myself on the project, it automatically picks up my primary role as the project role, and that could then be modified if it's necessary. Now let's take a look at those 3 terms and look at them from the formal definition and key terms for resource management. So a role is a placeholder for a resource until a named resource can be assigned. So that's our objective, is that we want to begin the initial planning on a project and develop the project plan with a placeholder, a role. And then once we know what the requirements are in terms of demand, start, finish amounts for that role, then that demand amount can be communicated with the resource manager, and a resource can be found to replace the role. That next item down is resource, a named person that can perform work and has availability. So the resource, then determining the resource, is typically the responsibility of the resource manager. And then the last item here is the primary role. As it says, each named resource must be given a primary role, and the Clarity system will aggregate the resource availability in the role's capacity. What that means is that if we have 5 named resources in Clarity, each with a primary role, a project manager, then the system, the Clarity system, when it looks at project manager and it looks at the capacity of the role for project management within Clarity, it would identify that it has a capacity of 5 because there are 5 named resources with that as its primary role. Now we will go back into Clarity and the project team staffing page to look at 4 more terms that are key to resource management. The first one is allocation, and we see allocation is a column in the table, in the staffing table, and the allocation is what happens by adding a resource or role to a project. It's at this project level, so allocations are project level resource adds to a project. The next one here is this last column, ETC, and that is the same as assignment, or more fully, assignment ETC. And that comes from assigning roles or resources to tasks. It can only, in order to assign a role or resource to a task, they must be allocated to the project, meaning they have to be on the page that we're looking at. Then we can assign them to do work through a task. And that term is called assignment ETC in its fullest term. The next one on here is right next to it, actuals. Those are actual hours by resource. Only named resources that are open for time entry can charge to the project. In order to have actuals on the project, you have to be allocated to the project. It's your only access to get it onto your timesheet. And then through the normal timesheet process, actuals, of course, will only show up on here once the timesheet has been submitted, approved, and gone through the posting process. The last term is availability. And while availability does not show as a column on here, it is in here indirectly. And that is by this percent allocation. The percentage is percentage of the availability. And so the amount of hours of availability is, of course, key to the resource management process and the way projects are staffed and hours are generated and all of that. Now we'll just turn our attention to the formal definition of those key terms. Availability, the hours per day resources available for project work, and this is stored in the resources calendar, which is associated with the properties of the resource record. Allocation, the hours planned for use of the resource or role on the project. So allocation being the project level assignment of the resource to the project. It's allocation, project level. The next one is assignment, the estimated hours of work effort allocated to each resource or role on a task. So assignment, as I said before, assignment ETC is a fuller definition. Sometimes in different parts of Clarity they refer to either or both. And so you need to be able to associate the terms together. Assignment ETC or assignment ETC all mean the same, and it is a resource or role assigned to a task given hours of work.